to the Who Dat Nation. Welcome to the Dome Patrol podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and the preseason is officially over as the New Orleans Saints, in their final preseason game of the year, fall to the Houston Texans by the score of 17-13. And as always, preseason, who cares? We're not worried about wins and losses. It would have been nice to finally go undefeated in a preseason, something that we've never done in our history. But look, it doesn't matter. None of that is going to help us in the long run. It won't help us to get home field advantage. It won't solidify a playoff spot. None of that. None of this matters. This was solely to evaluate talent. And I still have questions. There are still questions related to players on this team. And I guess there's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. And we have a lot of decisions to make in the next couple of days. The Saints have to get their roster down to 53 by Tuesday, and I don't know who's going to make this team. In the final spots, we all know the starters. We know Derek Carr. We know Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, so on and so forth. We know that. But there were some positions. There are some battles that I feel are still up in the air. It's still going to be tough to figure out who will start. It's not just make the team, but who's going to be the starter. For instance, there was a position battle that I didn't see coming when preseason started. There was a position battle for kicker. This was an actual battle in camp, and I didn't even know we drafted another kicker or signed another kicker. I knew we had Will Lutz, and I was cool with that. He struggled last year, but that's all right. I have faith in Will Lutz. But this new kicker we have, what's it, Galpy? This dude has a leg. Now, he missed one today. It was a 60-yarder, but he got a leg. It had the distance. The distance wasn't the problem. He has a leg, and this is a real problem. I did read a report last week about Sean Payton, over there in Denver, is willing to make a trade for one of these kickers, Will Lutz or the young rookie that we have. And if that's the case, that's fine, because both of them are NFL place kickers, and I can see either one of them, getting this job. But the decision, do you have faith in this young kicker? When the pressure's on and whatnot. Now, he kicked the game winner against the Chiefs in the first preseason game. That was cool. That was a pressure situation, and he handled it. He's been money, with the exception of that one kick, which I really don't count. I didn't expect him to make that kick, but when the kick went up in the air, normally when you're kicking a long distance kick like that, a 60-yard field goal try, you would kick it at a low trajectory. He didn't. That kick was high. It was like a extra point style arc of a kick, and he could have made it from 68. The commentator said on the game, and I believe, he nailed that kick. It just trailed off to the right. But anywho's, yeah, that's a big question mark there. Who's going to be our kicker? Because I doubt if we keep two kickers on the roster. This isn't Sean Payton keeping John Carney, and who else we had on the right? We had two kickers. I think it was it Hartley? It was two kickers we had kept. This was what was that? 07, 08, somewhere up in there. That they had two kickers on the roster. It was ridiculous. But whatever the case may be, I don't think that's going to happen this year. The other battle was the cornerback position. The I guess you could say the second cornerback position between Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor. I still give the edge to Adebo for that second spot. I like Taylor. It is a good problem to have there because either way you go, I think you have a quality cornerback there. And so it's I don't think we could have lost on that. It was just more of, who was the better man. And I think slightly it goes to Adebo. Moving on to our defensive line. Our defensive line had a lot of questions going into this season, going into this preseason. Can they generate pressure? And for the most part, they did. There are still some weak links there. Our third round pick, Isaac Forsky, he did step it up today. I saw him in the backfield a few times. I saw him make a stop. I saw him just blow up the running back on one of those plays. I was like, okay, there you go. I think he got a sack. He stepped it up because he had to. He got called out last week by the coach on national TV, so he had to step it up. Our first round pick, Breesy, that dude's gonna be a problem, bro. That dude is nice. He looked good today. I'm really encouraged by that. He got in that backfield. The moves he was putting on those offensive linemen was like, wow. Normally you see those moves from a defensive end, not a defensive tackle. And with the spin moves and the swim moves and all that, but he does it in the middle, right there at the tackle position, and he's fast. So I'm encouraged by that. What I'm discouraged by is our offensive line. Our offensive line looked horrible. They looked bad today. They didn't run block good. They didn't protect good. They just looked bad. Now, granted, the Houston Texans played their starters in the first quarter, I believe, whereas the Saints didn't. But man, they looked like high school kids out there. They looked bad. They really did. And it says a lot about Andrus Peat because he was out there with the second string and he looked even worse in that in that position. So I think he lost that battle to James Hurst. But I don't see the Saints cutting him because of his contract. But I don't see him start. Even though they may start him because of that contract. But that'll be the only reason he starts. Andrus Peat, I think that ship and sailed, and it's time to let that go. And that offensive line needs to get real good real quick because 2 weeks will be here before you know it, and we'll be facing the the Tennessee Titans. And so I don't know how we fix that problem. Our other battle that I didn't see coming was that tight end. Now, I don't want to blow things out of proportion. I know this was, like I said, a preseason game. There was only 3 catches, but Jimmy Graham looked like 2013 Jimmy Graham out there. I mean, let's not get it twisted here. That is a big target and a ultimate weapon in the red zone. He is a automatic mismatch. Who is big enough and strong enough to defend this guy in the red zone? I mean, he's a former basketball player, so he knows how to box out and grab a rebound. And that's basically what you're doing. You're throwing the ball up to him, and he can box out a defender and catch it. And so it's hard to say that Jimmy Graham won't make this team, especially with Lucas Kroll not looking too hot. He looked good in the fourth quarter, don't get me wrong, but they were forcing him down our throat. He was the only one getting the ball in the fourth quarter, so it really wasn't fair. I think he had over 100 yards receiving today. Now, I'm not poo-pooing on that. I mean, he had a decent game, but I don't know if it was enough to overtake Jimmy Graham. But we shall see. I'm not the GM, so I don't know how they're going to make these decisions. And Tuesday, we will find out the final decisions, and we're going to talk about it then. But let's go over this game. Once again, the New Orleans Saints fall to the Texans 17-13. It was better in the aspect we didn't have the penalty fest like we normally have when we had the previous two preseason games. They looked better discipline wise, so I was encouraged by that. But I wasn't encouraged by their effort. It looked like some players were out there and they felt like they were on the team. They made the cut already. And I just didn't see that effort from a lot of these players compared to what you saw on the other side of the field with the Houston Texans. Those guys played like it was a week 13 need this win to clinch the division type game. They gave effort in this game, and I was expecting to see that from some of these players for our Saints, and I didn't get that with a lot of the players, and that was kind of discouraging. I'll be honest and say. Let's go over the stats in this game, and we're going to get up out of here. It's not much to talk about in this game. It was what it was. It was some good things to take away, but nothing to write home and tell mom about. But it is what it is. It's over. Preseason is over, and this looked like a preseason game. Let's start off with passing. Our leading passer tonight was Jake Hader. He was 17 of 38 for 172 yards, no touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. Jameis Winston was 11 for 16, 93 yards, and 1 touchdown. Our leading rusher today, Jake Hader. He had 2 carries for 32 yards. Ellis Merriweather had 8 carries for 32 yards. Adam Patience had 2 carries for 18 yards. Kendrick Miller had 8 carries for 14 yards. And Shaq Davis had 1 carry for -5 yards on that end around that was blown up. Receiving, our leading receiver today was Lucas Crow. He had 7 catches for 106 yards. Kirtland had 5 catches for 64 yards. Jimmy Graham had 3 catches for 34 yards and a touchdown. Shaq Davis had 2 catches for 18 yards. Kwan Baker had 2 catches for 17 yards. A.T. Perry had 3 catches for 12 yards. Kendrick Miller, 3 catches for 10 yards. Ellis Merriweather, 2 catches for 5 yards. Our leading tackler today was Stroll. He had 7 tackles total. 5 of them were solo. Jalen Smith had 5 total tackles. 4 was solo. Anthony Johnson had 5 total tackles. 3 was solo. Going over team stats, beginning with first downs. Saints had 18 first downs. 13 by passing, 5 by rushing, none by penalty. The Houston Texans had 11 first downs, 8 by passing, 3 by rushing, none by penalty. That is excellent to hear. On third down efficiency, Saints were 8 for 20. That's not good to hear. Houston Texans were 5 for 16. On fourth down efficiency, Houston Texans were 0 for 1. Saints were 0 for 2. Total plays, Saints ran 77 plays to the Houston Texans 61. Total yardage, Saints had 348 yards to the Houston Texans 235. Total drives, Saints had 14 drives, Houston Texans had 15. Yards per play, Saints were 4.5 yards per play to the Texans 3.9. Passing, Saints had a total of 257 yards of passing. the Houston Texans had 104. Rushing, Saints had 91 yards rushing to the Houston Texans 131. In the red zone, Houston Texans were 2 for 3 in the red zone. Saints were 100% in the red zone, 1 for 1. Penalties today, this was the stat that blew my mind. Houston Texans had 5 penalties, totaling 45 yards. The Saints, who in this preseason been averaging about 50 penalties a game, had 2 penalties for 15 yards today. Awesome. Awesome improvement. Saints turned the ball over twice with the 2 interceptions thrown by Jake Hader. Time of possession, Saints had the ball 30 minutes and 9 seconds to the Houston Texans 29 minutes and 51 seconds. What I can take away from this game is I'm prepared for the regular season. I'm prepared to see the starters. I'm prepared to see them play a full game. I think we were robbed of that this preseason. There was not much starter play. I mean, we only saw Derek Carr for 1 series in the first game, and that was it. You know, we didn't get to see the chemistry between him and Michael Thomas and Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson, and we didn't get to see a lot of Jamal Williams. We didn't get to see Darrell Williams that often. Running backs. So it's kind of like it's not much to evaluate there. Now it was good to see the backups and to see who will be, backing up our starters in the event something goes wrong, but I wanted to see the starters. I wanted to see more, because honestly, I don't know what to expect going into this season. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't expecting the starters to play every game, of course. I wasn't expecting them to play full halves and risk injury. I get all that. But at the same time, that's kind of, I don't know. I don't like that narrative. We want to protect our players. We don't want them to get hurt. But they're about to play a full game in a couple of weeks. I mean, you're not going to protect them then. They're going to play all 4 quarters. It doesn't matter. It's football. And this is me sitting here behind this desk saying this. So I'm not on the field. And so I get it from their standpoint. But in football, in sports, period, you need chemistry. You need a camaraderie on the field. You got to know. Well, let me put it like this. You can only practice so much against yourself. You really need to get out there against different individuals and see what they're throwing at you and how you can adjust. We didn't get a joint practice between us and the Texans. They canceled that because of the injury thing. They didn't want to get any players hurt. It was a collective decision between the Texans and the Saints. So I understand, but at the same time, that's the whole point, I thought, because if that's the case, why play the game? I didn't understand that when they announced that earlier this week. But whatever, it is what it is. I guess everybody just ready to get this over with so we can get the ball rolling on the regular season. I am excited to see what's next leading up to this season opener against the Tennessee Titans. Let's see how this roster plays out so I can get a feel of what's to come, because right now I'm just floating in limbo like everybody else. I don't know what to expect out of this team, but I am encouraged by some of the things that I saw. There's some players that I know definitively will not make this team. There are some players that I think didn't get a lot of opportunities as well. Kind of unfair to them. Some receivers that just did not get a shot in this last game because Jake Hader was going exclusively to Lucas Kroll. He wasn't looking for anybody else. I don't know what the reason was. Maybe they were locked up downfield, but they didn't even get a shot, and I think that kind of stinks on their behalf. But hey, whatever. At that point, we were trying to win a game, and yeah, I think they should have did a better job of trying to spread this ball around because Lucas Kroll had like triple coverage on him every play because they knew what he was going to him every play. But regardless, let's see what happens on Tuesday. We'll be back on Tuesday to break down the final 53-man roster of the Saints and prepare for this season opener that is coming up on September the 10th. I would like to know, how did you feel about this preseason, the whole preseason, not just this game, but all 3 games? Are you encouraged by what you saw? Do you have questions? Are you kind of worried about certain positions? I'd like to know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network, as well as YouTube. Look for the KB Radio Network channel. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Dome Patrol podcast here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, it's been a blast this preseason. Can't wait to get to this new season, this regular season kickoff. Oh man, I am so ready. This is the final weekend without football. Next weekend we have college football, and then the weekend after that it's full steam ahead. Oh man, I can't wait. I'll be speaking to you later this week when we break down the 53-man roster. Until then, you can find me by hearing me scream, "Who dat?"